You've heard it. Many statements start with "in the post-war era," and then some statistic or condition is offered. In the post-war era, home ownership, fill in the blank. In the post-war era, the percentage of people with health insurance, fill in the blank. In the post-war era, etc., etc. The period of time after World War II is considered the post-war era. This is generally accepted as a dividing line in history, and although some historians will say the post-war era has already ended, most in society still refer to today as the post-war era, and that World War II was a dividing line in history and somewhat of a fresh start. Comparing life today to any time in the post-war era makes sense and it seems appropriate, but comparing to the period before World War II often seems like an apples to orange comparison. It was too long ago and the world has changed too much for a comparison to make sense. Hence why World War II is a dividing line in history. I am wondering if the coronavirus will act as a similar dividing line in history, that the post-war era is ending and a new era is beginning. 30 years from now, we may reference both the post-war era and the post-virus era. And just like the Depression and World War II permanently changed the world, in many aspects, the virus is changing the world, possibly forever. We have a highly contagious virus rapidly spreading around the world. For some, they get sick, have mild symptoms, and generally are fine a week or so later. It's not that much different than a bad cold. For others, for whatever reason, it's a death sentence. They're gone within a couple days. The entire world is being shut down. Entire countries are being quarantined. Fear is everywhere. Stock markets have crashed. The situation is bad and getting worse. Best case scenario coming out of this is in 4 to 6 months, a treatment is created. A treatment is for people who already have the virus. You get it, you get medicine or some sort of antibiotic, and within a couple of weeks, you're fine. People can go back to work and get back to living their lives. It'll take a little while for life to get back to normal, but like other horrible times in history, we'll make it, we'll be okay. Okay, this is best case scenario. We'll get through it. It'll take a little while for life to get back to normal, and it'll probably take a year longer for stock markets to get back to their highs. Worst case is not just gloom and doom. Worst case is the coronavirus is such a life-changing period, it acts as a dividing line in history. It ends the post-war era and starts a new era because life on the other side is so much different than what's on this side. Life after World War II was much different than before. The world changed, people changed. Okay, the same type of dividing line is possibly being drawn right now. And I'm not saying it'll be a bad thing. Maybe what's on the other side, it will be better. Who knows? But I do know it will be different. Okay, this is worst case scenario, that the coronavirus is so bad, it draws a dividing line in history. Okay, I personally don't think what's on the other side of that dividing line will be that bad. In fact, it might be pretty darn good. The US and the world has dealt with a lot of horrible events and time periods in history, and life has always continued on and been better than before, regardless of how horrendous the near term was. But that's not my fear. My fear isn't what's on the other side of the dividing line. My fear is what takes place during the dividing line and how thick is the dividing line. What's on the other side of the dividing line might be great, but it could take a couple of years to get there. Okay? The entire world is built on debt. It's been like this forever. Does that finally get unwound? Personal debt, corporate debt, municipalities, states, entire countries. Massive debt is everywhere. Unfunded pensions, completely unrealistic financial obligations going decades into the future. Does it all get unwound? I don't know. There will certainly be a lot of social upheaval. Okay, fights between rich and poor, between social classes, the haves and have-nots, the college-educated versus the non-college educated, the healthy versus the unhealthy, old versus young. We are divided in many ways. A lot of pressure has built up over the years. And if the coronavirus acts as the pinprick that unleashes all this pent-up pressure, the next couple of years will not be happy times for many. The deepest, darkest depths of what takes place in the dividing line could be among the most horrific and contested in history. I'm not predicting it, but you can sense the level of discourse around the world being so wound up that if the system breaks apart, it won't be a quick and easy fix. Okay? It's a line that could be several years thick, and what emerges on the other side will be very different than what we're accustomed to. Again, I'm not predicting this, But I am throwing another viewpoint out there. Most people think worst case scenario is a stiff market correction, the government bails everyone out, and a year or two later things get back to normal. I think worst case scenario is the post-World War II era ends and a new era begins. And while the world on the other side of that dividing line might not be that bad, will just be different, I have a genuine fear of what takes place within the dividing line. Okay? Be well, see you next time, and perhaps I'll see you on the other side.